Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. I hope you're all doing well this morning. It's been a long week, and so I thought I'd sit back and relax with something new and different, which sounds awfully familiar, at least at the outset. So earlier this week, an image was making the rounds on Twitter, or at least in my little corner of the Twitterverse, and it was this. The first page of a published work by Shaniqua Walker-Barnes, PhD, entitled Prayer of a Weary Black Woman. And just for everyone's edification, I will read that now so we all know where we stand and what caught my eye about this. It reads, in part, Dear God, please help me to hate white people, or at least to want to hate them. At least, I want to stop caring about them individually and collectively. I want to stop caring about their misguided, racist souls, to stop believing that they can be better, that they can stop being racist. I am not talking about the white anti-racist allies who have taken up this struggle against racism with their whole lives, the ones who stand vigil for weeks outside jails where black women are killed, who show up in Charlottesville and Ferguson and Baltimore and Pasadena to take a public stand against racism and police brutality, who are so committed to fighting white supremacy that their own lives bear the wounds of its scars. It goes on from there, but the introductory paragraph or two are the parts that caught my attention and the attention of several other people as that image got shared around quite a bit. So I was curious, as I am wont to do, to look up who our author was. And lo and behold, she did a talk. Now, at first, you'd think this was a TED Talk, or a TEDx talk, because of the format, but no, it's something I hadn't even heard of before, a Theo-Ed talk. And given the context of the published work, I can only assume, as you know me, why do too much research into something that I want to be surprised by, that Theo refers to theology. Now, I haven't touched upon religion a whole lot on my channel, at least not in recent years. You can find a playlist of videos I've done in response to a channel called Islamic Pulse from years past, but I thought I would take a look at this because the title of the presentation, as far as I know, at least directly, doesn't refer to faith. Well, perhaps, but the title is Pathological Whiteness. So let's dive into this as we go. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Hello, Kyle. Another note, originally I had thought, and forgive me for thinking so, that this presentation runs 23 minutes. Well, that is the clock on the video as posted at the site. You can find the link to the original below if you'd like to watch it in totality. But the thing is, 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes of that recording is just blank tape. It's just nothing. It just ends, and then there's a black screen for 5 minutes. So it's actually only about 18 minutes long. So slightly longer than your average TEDx talk. So all that being said as preamble, let's get right into it. I will start off with a few seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear this, and then we will proceed with Pathological Whiteness.
How does it feel?
How does it feel? I guess we'll find out what I'm supposed to be feeling about here momentarily. And let's see. Everybody hear that okay? Sounds good, says Dr. Keeve. Sounds good, says Seftus. Well, feels good, says Arc210. All right, well, if everybody's feeling good and sounding good, how does it feel
To be a problem.
Well, I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask my mother.
This was the question that W.E.B. Du Bois posed to Black Americans in 1903 in his now classic text, The Souls of Black Folk. It had been just a few decades since the end of slavery and Reconstruction, and the United States was grappling with the problem of what to do with Black Americans.
1903. Okay, so we're sitting on a text written back in 1903. All right, just for reference.
who had been freed from slavery, but whose liberation threatened the unity of white Americans in the North and the South. Since then, the question of what to do about Black people has dominated discourse in the US.
Has it? Really? Okay, if you say so.
What do we do about Black people?
Yeah, I know. I ask that question every single day. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have that question on my mind every single day. Says you.
About their poverty, their educational achievement gaps, their heightened rates of morbidity and mortality, their voting rights, even their presence in our neighborhoods, schools, and churches.
Yes, you are at the center of my thoughts every day, every minute. You truly are. Not the welfare of people in general, the education of people, poverty of people, and so on. But yeah, I think of people in racial categories first and foremost. That's what I do. Says you.
The irony of this question is that it is whiteness and not Blackness that is at the heart of racism.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me about assessing people on the basis of their skin color. Oh, speaker on a stage. Tell me about racism.
There are many forms of racism around the world, but in the United States, racism is about promoting and maintaining white supremacy.
Is it? Really? In the United States, that's within the borders of the United States, that's the only definition and or practice of racism? Huh. Okay. Well, tell me more about the inherent flaw of white people. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk, for the happy dancing dogcat fox. Oh, dogcat fox.
The belief that white people are inherently superior to all other peoples of the world. And this includes everything about white people.
All other people of the world. So like Russians and Slavic people and Norwegian people. Really? Okay.
Their bodies, their aesthetics, their beliefs, customs, values.
Mm-hmm.
White supremacy
Yes.
maintains that white people are uniquely suited for citizenship and self-governance.
Really? Oh, okay. Well, I suppose if you are actually a white supremacist, that might be true of your beliefs. All right. But that is an overarching philosophy in America, you say. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Matt Barnes. She caught us, gang. She cracked the secret white supremacist book, pages 22 to 58. Yeah, well, I mean, let's be honest. In the realm of actual white supremacist thinking, our speaker is not wrong. The accusation that it is the prevalent philosophy in this country, I would certainly challenge the accuracy of that statement.
That they ought to wield dominion and authority over all of creation, and that this is the way that God intends it.
Yep. Okay, so this is where we get into the religious theological element of this, I suppose. Okay. Well, I will withhold comment for a little while longer. I'm attempting. I've been criticized of this in the past, and I'm trying to do better. Is to not interject every 3 seconds, despite my fear of a content match strike or something else. Because I can honestly say this is fair use. Anyway.
The cleverness of white supremacy is that it convinces us that it is the victims of racism who are the problem, when really the problem lies in the hearts, minds, bodies, and souls of the oppressors.
Aha. And racism only goes one way, right?
Indeed, if anything has become clear since the election of November 2016, It is that America has a problem and its name is whiteness.
Oh, okay. Well, what was the conditions of everyone's minds on November, was it 4th? I forget exactly, but of 2008. What was going on then and for the intervening 8 years? Any notion about that at all?
So, white people,
Yes.
how does it feel to be a problem?
Oh, well, I don't know. Why don't you tell me how much of a problem you have with white people? And then lecture me, and I suppose everybody in my racial demographic, about how we're all racist.
Now, you might be uncomfortable by my explicit naming of whiteness and my use of terms by like white people.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, it's kind of racist, you know? I mean, it doesn't inherently damage me or anything, but I find it entertaining that you'd complain about the concept of racism and then go on to express it yourself with a smile.
It might feel like an insult or an accusation,
You don't say.
but that itself is part of the problem.
Hmm.
Why is it, after all, that we can use terms like Black and Latinx and Indigenous and Asian American, but when we say white people cringe? Why is it that I am comfortable checking off the black box on survey forms, but white people don't like to have their race named out loud?
Oh, is that something that white people think and feel? Oh, okay. Well, tell me more about the knowledge you have of people on the basis of their skin color.
Why is it that I can have a racial identity and white people cannot?
Because racial identitarianism is bullshit and a scourge of, well, societies near and far. I mean, you decry white supremacy, and whitely so. Oh, Freudian slip. You decry white supremacy, and rightly so, but then you will extol the idea of having a racial identity? Interesting.
That my race is marked, but whiteness is considered normal, neutral, just American.
Thank you, Matt Barnes. Wait, who enacted Jim Crow laws and filibusters the Civil Rights Act for 72 hours again? Was it Republicans? Ow. I mean, she hasn't gotten into politics yet. I'm not sure if politics makes a difference here. I suppose we'll find out as we go.
So again, I'll ask, how does it feel to be a problem?
You'll have to tell me. Thank you, ex-Bubba Hotep. Whitely so. What? Okay. I mean, if that was a Fonzie joke, maybe I missed it. But either way. Okay, how does it feel to be a problem? Well, obviously you have a problem with me in the abstract because of my skin color. So it feels a bit confusing because you don't know me, but you're attributing some quality of character to me, you know, in the absence of actual contact simply because of my skin color. So I'm confused that that's something that you are comfortable with, given your previous comments about the legitimate, you know, evils of racial supremacy. Thank you, Lancelot 652. Silly scribe, time didn't exist before 2016 election. Yeah, Satsu's told us this many times, and he hasn't been wrong.
I have been navigating white culture for much of my life. And one of the things that I have noticed, indeed anyone can who's been in white spaces, is that white people often react in very culturally prescribed ways, especially when the topic of racism comes up.
Yeah, I think that might be, I'm just going out on a limb here, I think that might be because in the current zeitgeist, bringing up whiteness or race or anything else is usually a preamble to a lecture on how white people are racist. You know, it's one of those Pavlovian responses. If you have something that is oncoming, that is telling you that you are about to be vilified for what you are and not who you are, that you're about to be put on the spot and be held to account for things you have nothing to do with or philosophies that you don't necessarily adhere to, yeah, it does become uncomfortable. You know, what's the appropriate term for something like that? Oh, a trigger warning. Yeah, something like that. Thank you again, Matt Barnes. She did bring up 2016 with racism as if only white people vote. I guess. I mean, again, we are existing in the world of our speaker at present.
If you've been in these spaces long enough, you can begin to predict these responses with startling accuracy.
So long as the people involved are white, correct? You just know ahead of time how they're going to behave. Okay.
Robin DiAngelo called one set of these responses white fragility.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if there is an invisible force field connecting white people across space and time, directing their responses in ways that they cannot see.
Yes, white people are a monolith, a hive mind, controlled by invisible threads of power, I guess. And our speaker knows this. Okay. Tell me more.
In family therapy, we call that a system. And as a Black person who's been in that system, who's been living and working and sometimes worshiping in white contexts, I have had to learn how to navigate it in some peculiar ways many people of color do. We often have to code switch to adapt our behavior to fit into white spaces so that white people will think that we fit in, so that they'll invite us to the study groups or let us know about the jobs or write us letters of recommendation or hire us.
Okay, so you're deferring to someone else that you imagine is going to judge you, and so you adapt yourself to fit in with what you think they want to see. Sounds like you're making a whole lot of choices of your own volition and then holding someone else to account for making you do these things. I mean, I don't know. Just that's what it sounds like to me. But then, you know, what do I know? I am white.
We've had to learn the contours of whiteness in order to avoid its sharp edges. We have had to bend and sidestep and sometimes leap to avoid its assault. We have had to armor up, to harden and conceal ourselves to withstand the brunt of its day-to-day impact.
Wow, you think about race quite a bit, sounds like. Fitting, I suppose.
This is the system that we have to learn to navigate.
Okay, so not only have you described and condemned all white people, but you also speak for all Black people. All right.
And it's not just a system, it's a pathological one. In other words, it is a dysfunctional pattern of behavior that white people often feel compelled to act out, even though it might pose a danger to people of other races, even though it might cause them distress. Now, as a clinical psychologist, I have a peculiar relationship to pathology.
Peculiar is a pretty good word, all things considered at the moment. Yes, peculiar. Yeah. Tell me more about how skin color determines character and psychological quality. I'm very curious to know.
Other people like to turn away from pathology, to pretend it doesn't exist, to repress it, except for when they watch it on reality television. But clinical psychologists, we like to walk right up to pathology and say, you mind if I take a closer look?
I have no idea what you mean. I'm afraid you can't talk shop with me. I'm a lowly pleb. You're going to have to give me some active examples of what you're talking about.
And so I have taken a closer look at the pathology of whiteness in order to identify its symptoms, because every pathology has its symptoms.
Okay, so white skin is a disease. Is that what I'm to understand? I mean, it's a mental disease, right?
And these symptoms are kind of the rules of white culture. I'm going to name a few of them today, and I'll say these are not definitive or exhausted.
No, they're just things you're going to throw out there because they're your favorites.
But do me a favor and try them on. See if they are descriptive of your experience of whiteness, whether that is your racial identity or not.
Yeah, I don't have a racial identity. I have an identity. I have a name. I don't move through the world thinking of myself as a color. But to each their own, I suppose. But all right, I am ready to be educated. Give me your list.
The first symptom is conformity. Whiteness is kind of like the old American Express slogan: membership has its privileges. From the colonial period until today, whiteness has been a key marker of fitness for U.S. citizenship. In slavery, your racial identity was the sole determinant of your rights. If you were white, you were free.
Really? If you were white, you were free. There were no indentured servants or otherwise in our country's history who were white. Oh, okay. I'm wondering if she'll go on to tell us about the evolution of what qualified as white, because that's usually the next step in that argument. Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk. I'd love to get her to explain why Asian people perform above white people in earnings on average. Are they more white? How does this work exactly? I don't know. But I'm sure she's got a theory. Or if she doesn't have a theory, then it's not worth talking about. But okay, tell me about white people were all free.
If you were Black, you were enslavable. And if you were indigenous, you were exterminable. The peculiar cruelty of U.S. slavery is that it only took one drop of African blood to make somebody, their default status was bondage. It took freeze papers to prove otherwise.
Okay, so slavery was a uniquely white on black circumstance. There was no slavery practiced amongst Native American tribes. There was no slavery practiced amongst peoples of Africa. The only dynamic, the only instance where it happened was here from white to black. And just to clarify, as if I need to do so, just because other people did it doesn't mean it makes it okay. But to speak of this, for lack of a better phrase, tradition as somehow unique to here, kind of lets a whole lot of humanity and history off of the hook, doesn't it? Which we shouldn't do, because we are all, I think, collectively trying to advance in time and not deny the reality of the past. I hear that a lot. I hear that we're not supposed to forget the past. So why be selective? I can only imagine.
In much the same way that brown people today might have to carry their identity papers on them to prove their documentation or their legal status.
All of us have to carry our documentation and legal status. I have to take my driver's license with me wherever I go. It's kind of one of those requirements. If you're above 18, I think it is. It's not, always enforced. It's not always one of those papers, please situations. But generally speaking, you are expected to carry identification on you regardless of your skin color in this country. So, yeah, missed the mark on that one. Thank you, Matt Barr. And sorry, Scribe. According to Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project, Asians are white. I've heard that too. So except that now they're not, I heard recently, or there's a separation again. It's also very fluid, what qualifies as one categorization of racial identity or not, depending on what the day is. I think it'd just be a lot easier if we just kind of set the whole racial identity thing aside and tossed it into the dustbin of history where it belongs. But what do I know? I mean, I am white.
New European immigrants to the United States, this was the racial contract that they had to take part in.
The racial contract. Oh, okay. All right.
They had to prove themselves on the right side or the white side of this racial contract daily by adhering to white cultural norms.
So our American laws, values, language, those kind of things that we have on it might be the modern citizenship test, but I mean, if I were trying to immigrate to, I don't know, Australia, would I be expected to follow Australian cultural norms? If I was trying to immigrate to China, would I be expected to follow Chinese cultural norms? As someone who wants to live there, as someone who wants to exist amongst people of a different country and a different culture that I didn't previously belong to? Would I be expected to follow the laws of any particular state or country or province that I find myself in? Is that somehow a crime?
On the one hand, this meant giving up their own racial ethnic identity.
When? I mean, in the modern day, if we're going to keep dwelling on the bad old days where we didn't have civil rights established and laws were a lot more loose and people a lot more corrupt in our government and our legal system and everything else, back before we had all the reforms we've had, because this is a common theme. We'll just ignore every advancement made in our country, in our laws, in our society, towards a quote unquote more perfect union. Never perfect, because there's no such thing. Still flawed, always will be in some way, shape, or form. But if we're talking about the European migrants of what, like the early 1900s, where are we talking about? They're expected to give up their traditions and their ethnicity and everything else. Really? Huh? Because, there's a whole lot of traditions from places that aren't North America that still exist today and are cherished. Okay.
Their names.
Do tell.
Their language.
Really? Do tell.
Their ways of eating and dressing.
Really? Oh, okay. When was this? When was this? European migrants. Their styles of food, their styles of dress, their language, their traditions, all of these were stripped away from them? Under what process?
Their holidays, their customs and traditions.
Really? Oh, okay. So, well, tell me, what European custom, tradition, language, food, style of dress, etc., was eliminated by law? I'm very curious to know this.
And they had to take on the hallmarks of white middle-class propriety.
Such as?
Avoiding conflict.
Avoiding conflict is a hallmark of white middle-class propriety. I thought that was a survival instinct amongst living things.
Valuing emotional restraint.
Valuing emotional restraint is a hallmark of white middle-class propriety. Okay.
Valuing emotional restraint, privileging formal education over life experience and having a perceived right to entitlement or comfort.
What, valuing a formal education over life experience. What, valuing education? Okay, so in order to defy white propriety, you should avoid a formal education, not restrain your emotions, and seek conflict. Is that what I am to understand?
In exchange for their conformity, they got to partake in the privileges and benefits of whiteness: freedom, land ownership, having the right to the access to the wages of their labor and the wages of other people's labor.
The wages of their labor and the wages of other people's labor. Okay. Do you benefit from anybody else's labor? I mean, did you make all of your clothing yourself? I mean, I'm presuming you paid for some of it with money that you earned with your labor and you benefited from someone else's labor, I guess. But are we still talking about Eastern Europeans coming over here? They gave up all of their culture, everything, their clothes, their language, etc., and had to do away with their thirst for conflict, their abhorrence of education, and their inability to control their emotions. I'm mightily confused is what I am. But hey, what do I know? I mean, I am white.
Being able to vote and have their vote counted fairly, even the right to be armed and angry in public space. But these were tenuous privileges. People striving for whiteness had to be constantly vigilant of how they were perceived by other people to make sure they were seen as being on the right side of the racial contract, because the system punished people who fell on the wrong side. It branded them as race traitors or maybe poor white trash.
Race traitors. You know, I see notions of that a lot lately on Twitter, in certain spheres thereof. Maybe I'm in the wrong ones, though, because I don't usually see it that often, if I see it at all, from white people to other white people.
And so white people learned how to police themselves and how to police other people, because this is how you keep a system like slavery in place. You teach people to stay in their place, to conform.
Wow. I mean, we did a terrible job because a whole lot of white people died over the fight to effectively end slavery, which we did. Far too late for my liking, but hey, that's history. So I'm going to talk about that part at all at any point, maybe.
This brings us to the second symptom.
Oh, okay.
Trust in authority.
The second symptom of pathological whiteness is trust in authority. Really? Trust in authority in America. Right. Thank you, ex-Bubba Hotep. I had too much to say that I just shook my head and said, fuck it. Well, I'm holding back a bit. I know those of you who've paid attention to me for a while now, I'm not hitting the pause button as often as I usually do. I'm trying to let this wash over me a bit, but Okay, the second symptom of pathological whiteness is trust in authority. In a country that was founded on revolution against a king, on a country that still resonates with the distrust of government, with everything with gate after it, because of the biggest scandal of the lack of public trust and authority in common memory. Okay, tell me more about how pathological whiteness results in trust and authority.
Being able to conform to the system was dependent on being able to trust that the system would work in your behalf. And that's what the US systems, the economic, judicial, legislative, even religious systems were designed to do, to promote and maintain white dominance in all areas of society.
Okay, and 2008 was reflecting what exactly?
The Capitol insurrectionists knew this. This was the world that they saw weakening and that they wanted to reinscribe.
And how successful were they at doing that? And, if the system, by the way, which is controlled by all white people, for white people, by white people all the time, why did the quote unquote insurrectionists feel the need to do what they did? I thought that pathological whiteness was a trust of authority. Why did they doubt the system that led to the election of Joe Biden if pathological whiteness leads to a trust of authority? I'm confused. Now, thank you, Matt Barnes. If you don't trust authority, you ain't white. Thanks, Joe. Boy, I'm having a hard time squaring this circle here with what she said versus what she's now saying.
They felt so assured of their right to do so that they took photos and videos of themselves breaking the law and posted it on social media.
And this is unique to white people in the modern day. Yeah, they felt so comfortable with the system that only serves them that they decided to storm the Capitol to attempt futilely to stop the system from working. Okay.
See, they didn't think it would matter because they thought the system would do what it would always done, have their back.
Really? They thought the system had their back, which is why they... Yeah, you're not making a good argument here, I'm sorry to say. Yeah.
And it's not just the insurrectionists who think like this. People conditioned into whiteness have been taught that those who wield authority and power will use it in their best interest, and that those authority figures will be held accountable if they do not.
Really? And that was the overriding philosophy that caused the insurrectionists to attempt to stop the election of Joe Biden, a white man, into a system that only serves them because they trust authority because of their whiteness. So, okay.
This is one of the reasons that so many white people, no matter if they consider themselves moderate or sometimes even liberal, they have difficulty condemning acts of police brutality against unarmed Black people. Whenever a new video arises, you'll hear things like, well, we don't know what really happened before the camera came on. I mean, surely he must have done something.
Yeah, and just to take the most recent and perhaps about to be mentioned example, you know that the video of George Floyd was universally endorsed by all white people because it was just a cop on an unarmed Black man. There was no outcry from anyone who was white about what happened there or the implications thereof at all at the time the video was released. No, not at all. It was just, yeah, cop doing his job. That's it. That was the reaction. Remember that? Remember that reaction? How everyone who was white was just like shrugging their shoulders and moving on with their day? Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers.
To cause the officer to act that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you'll hear something more like, I know the officer was wrong, but people are too quick to protest. They just need to let the system run its course.
Again, depends on the circumstances, but as we have seen most recently, it is not a bad idea to wait until all the information is available before making declarations or taking action on the basis of rumor or belief. That's usually a good rule for life in general. But I digress. Do I?
You see, believing in the system, trusting in the authority of the system means believing in the myth of meritocracy, the idea that people get what they deserve and earn.
The myth of meritocracy. Now, it is a myth that people get what they deserve and they earn, at least as a hard and fast rule, because life is inherently not fair. But so meritocracy is a myth. Okay. I'm keeping that in mind.
So if bad things happen to people like poverty or slavery or getting killed by police, it must be because they've done something bad to deserve it.
It is a case-by-case basis. The slavery part, I don't think anybody deserves slavery, so not quite sure why you included that one. But to say that being in poverty is inherently a crime upon you as a person, well, again, depends on why you are in poverty. What were the forces that put you there? Was it you were born into a poor family, or did you gamble all your money away? Sometimes it's personal choice. I don't know. You can't make glittering generalizations like that and expect me to believe you. And then as far as getting shot by police, well, again, it depends on the circumstances. This is why we have categories of justified or unjustified uses of force, because not every case says anything about the next case.
Or because they failed to do something good to avoid it. This is how you think when you've been taught to trust in the system.
Which is why the insurrectionists stormed the Capitol to stop a legal proceeding from taking place, to certify an elected president. They trusted the system. I know I keep coming back to that, but that was her primary example of this symptom. So, yeah.
The final symptom is selective sight.
Selective sight. Oh, are we going to talk about the misreading of the phrase colorblindness into literal rather than, principled? I'm guessing. I could be wrong.
Living in a slave-holding society.
When did you do that? When have I done that? Oh, yeah, never.
Require white people, particularly white Christians, to live in a state of profound cognitive, emotional, and spiritual dissonance. Slavery was a brutal system.
You really? Slavery was brutal? Oh my gosh. Really? People who practiced slavery but also practiced Christianity were hypocrites? Really? I don't know. What does the Bible say about slavery? What does the Bible say about slavery? And then, of course, what does it say about treating people equally, and etc.? The Bible's full of contradictions, but the Bible, Christianity, kind of a complicated subject. I presume you would know that if you're on a theo-ed stage. Are you going to deny the truth of the good book?
It required acts of daily terror and violence to keep it in place.
Yes, slavery is bad. You're correct.
Most white people, with the exception of abolitionists, were complicit in this system in some way. They either actively participated in Or they looked the other way and pretended it didn't exist even as they reaped its benefits.
Or they put their lives on the line in bloody battles against their own brothers and neighbors and fellow countrymen. Just a little bit of that.
Selective sight was what allowed them to deny and repress awareness of the evil that they were surrounded by and in which they participated. It allowed them to think of themselves and their relatives, their neighbors, their racial, ethnic skin folk as good, morally upright people.
Skin folk. Oh, I've never heard that before. I'm serious. I'm being sincere. Kinfolk, skin folk. Oh, man, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. Yes, back when slavery was in place, these things occurred. I do not deny it. What does that have to do with the right now?
Even as they participated in this act of brutal horror. Selective sight is also the reason why so many white Americans, Christian or otherwise, had such a hard time coping with what happened on January 6, 2021 with the Capitol insurrection.
Really? So you're going from slavery times to 2021. You're going to jump over all those little things that happen in between. You're going to take a small group of nut jobs and use that as an example of covering an entire racial demographic or an entire culture. Huh. Interesting theory. I wonder what you would think about people making assessments of you based on the actions of a small few elsewhere that have nothing to do with you. I wonder how you'd feel about that, especially if such things were categorized first and foremost by skin color. What would you say about that? I do wonder.
Over and over again on the news, on social media, in one-on-one conversations, we've heard people say it, this is not who we are. But for many Black people and other people of color, especially those of us who paid attention, well, this is who we are. This is who we always been. We've wondered why anybody was surprised. After all, the signs were there in full view. There were the takeover of federal lands in Oregon and Nevada, the riots in Charlottesville, the Michigan insurrection and plot to kidnap the governor.
Yeah. Thank you, ex-Bubba Hotep. Enslaving people was brutal. Oh my God, I didn't realize it till now, even after the thousands of years of it happening in history. Yeah, if you didn't know, by the way. Let's see, taking of land in Oregon. I seem to recall in Nevada, wasn't that white people's land that was being sort of co-opted by the government? I forget the name of the family in Oregon, but I remember the images of that in Nevada with snipers on the overpass or whatever. Is that what you? I honestly, I'm not trying to be facetious here. I don't know exactly what she's referring to, but I'm thinking about government taking of land. Ammon Bundy, was it Bundy? Ammon oh my God. If the last name wasn't Bundy and I've got that screwed up, I apologize. But anyway, there was a family or a collective in Oregon, I think it was, and then there was a different family of ranchers in Nevada or thereabouts who faced down the U.S. government. Is that what she's referring to? I don't know. I really don't know.
Even the mobs that have been popping up in places like New York City and DC, these were all dress rehearsals.
These are all dress rehearsals for the Capitol? The riots in Baltimore? Wait, I apologize. I need to back up because I've gotten discombobulated here with all these references.
Those of us who paid attention, well, this is who we are. This is who we always been. We've wondered why anybody was surprised. After all, the signs were there in full view. There were the takeover of federal lands in Oregon and Nevada.
Okay, the takeover of federal lands in Oregon and Nevada. Okay, I apologize. And sincerely, I misunderstood. So you're referring to the Bundy, I think it's the Bundy family or the group there in Oregon. You're talking about the ranchers who had the federal guys coming at them. The takeover of federal lands. Well, in the Nevada case, I think the guy was trying to keep the federal government off his property. And whether or not that was legitimate or not, I don't remember exactly. The Oregon situation, I remember it. I don't remember how it was very complicated. But what was that about trusting authority again?
The riots in Charlottesville.
The riots in Charlottesville. Uh-huh. Okay.
The Michigan insurrection and plot to kidnap the governor.
The governor, you mean the white governor? Thank you, ex-Bubba Hotep. Just for information, enslaving is fine, but slavery is not okay for Super Chat. Really? I did not know that. Okay. Okay, so you're going to select specific instances of white people rising up against either the government or doing bad things. The white people who have a trust of authority, of the system that they felt betrayed them, rightly or wrongly, with that second symptom of trusting authority. Okay. Thank you, Andrew Joyner. Funny, I was going to mention D'Angelo. She beat me to it. Yeah, Robin I was kind of surprised she hasn't talked more about Robin DiAngelo, but okay, just trying to get my mind straight here. Okay, these are all examples of warning signs of what was going to happen at the Capitol. Okay.
Even the mobs that have been popping up in places like New York City and DC, these were all dress rehearsals.
What was everything that happened over the course of the last summer? Right? I mean, what was the chop in Seattle? Right? What was the burning down of Minneapolis, or the Baltimore riots, or the Ferguson riots, or just the widespread riots of the last year? What are those a dress rehearsal for? What kind of warning should we take from those incidents? I'm just curious. I mean, if we're going to start using these as signs and portents of things to come and categorize it all on racial grounds, what should we be expecting next?
But when January 6th happened, so many white Americans had trouble believing it. They were dumbfounded by it because they were practicing selective sight.
Because they were white? And you know this of all white Americans. The vast majority. Okay.
And this is what selective sight does. It teaches people to ignore the obvious, especially when the obvious indicts them and their racial ethnic skin vote.
Okay, so this is a psychological element. This is something that just functions in people. All right. Is it possible, and I'm just throwing this out here, is it possible that you, in any way, shape, or form, suffer from selective sight? I mean, is it possible, or is it impossible? Just curious. Thank you, Mr. Tickle Trunk. You don't understand, Scribe. Those riots were for the good guys, so it's okay. Attacking government buildings and being racist is good when they do it. I'm just curious. I mean, if this is something where if she's functioning as a clinical psychologist, and we're talking about psychology, which is unique to human minds, then the patterns of behavior in one racial demographic certainly shouldn't be unique to them because they're all still human, right? Unless, again, I'm going out on a limb here, unless our speaker is attributing specific kinds of behavior and qualities of thought to people on the basis of their skin color, which, might just be a little racist.
So here we are.
Yes.
It's 100 years later since the publication of Du Bois's book, and the problem of the 21st century remains the problem of the color line.
Yeah, well, not for, setting aside all the strides made to try to move past it or improve relations and set laws right and etc. Yeah, I guess we're still here. We're still here thanks to thinking like yours.
This time, though, it is clearer to us that it is not the problem of Blackness, but it is the problem of whiteness.
No, it is the problem of racism. It is the problem of racism, the philosophy of delineating people by their skin color and then assessing them likewise. That is the problem. That is the problem that you are profiting off of, whether by clout or finance or otherwise. You want to divvy ways of thinking. You want to divvy character. You want to divvy states of being on the basis of race. You are doing that. You are perpetuating that. You are not helping. You're furthering. Now, are you doing it intentionally? Or are you suffering from selective sight? I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. I can't tell by looking at you what your motives or thoughts are. I can only take your words and actions as I see them coming.
Because it is becoming more and more obvious that whiteness is a dysfunctional system, that it is a pathology that poses a danger to the well-being of individual white people, definitely to the well-being of Black and other people of color, and it poses a threat to the fabric of our democracy if left unchecked.
Oh, okay. So by what method would you check whiteness in order to save our democracy? What mechanism would you suggest we put into play to check whiteness? I wonder if she'll say. Thank you, X-Bubba Hotep. Satsu is right. If you don't have a solution, then that is the perfect thing to push. Yeah. If you come up with a problem that will never go away and either, by implication or otherwise suggest that you have a path through that problem, which will never go away, then you can try to build a career on that. So in some instances, it's completely benign and benevolent, like disease. Disease will never go away. Injury will never go away. These things are going to happen just as a course of being alive. Therefore, doctors will always have a place in society and always have a relevant function to serve. Undertakers, dishwashers, tax collectors, some of these things are universal and perpetual. And then there's ways of thinking. Then there's ways of treating people. Then there are crimes like murder. Murder's not going anywhere. Right? This problem can't be solved. Someone can say, I'm going to try to solve murder, and I need your help to try to solve murder. And you'll always have a job for something that cannot be solved, either individually or otherwise. But, yep. So tell me, how do you solve for whiteness? You've got about 2 minutes.
And maybe for those of us who call ourselves Christians, more than that, it poses a threat to the integrity of our witness.
Oh, now we bring it back to religion. A couple of times, I was wondering why this was on a theo-ed stage, because there wasn't much talk about, faith or scripture or anything else, just a couple of spots here and there talking about Christians. But okay, tell us what Christians can do to check whiteness.
As people who profess the same faith and claim to be part of the same body and claim to believe that we are all created in the image of God. The good news, though, is that culture can be changed and pathology can be healed. The first step is naming the disease.
The disease. So, whiteness is a disease? I'll give you credit for being explicit if that's where we're going.
And then identifying its symptoms. And I have given you 3 to begin working with today.
Mhm.
Conformity,
Yes.
trust in authority,
Yes.
and selective sight.
Yes.
The next step and your challenge
Mm-hmm.
is to begin to determine how each of these is evident in your own life and to begin to practice little acts of dissent against the pathology of whiteness. Because little acts of dissent can and do make a difference. So, in conclusion, I'll ask one more time. How does it feel to be a problem? And what are you going to do about it? Thank you.
And that is it. If you go to the original link, the video will then continue on for another about 5 minutes or so of just nothing. So, wow, that was something. Not quite sure how else to put it. I've said my bit, so if everyone, if you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation after a fashion, put it in the chat now. Please be sure to tag me in your comments so I know it's to me and not amongst yourselves, which I do appreciate the conversation you guys all have with each other. Yeah, so I suppose given the text that we were presented with by our speaker in her writings, I'll bring that up again, I shouldn't be surprised by any of this. But I do wonder if she practices what she preaches. Does she ever stop for a moment and ask herself if she is practicing, most specifically, selective sight? Does she ever self-check her own philosophy, her own declarations against history? Just switch the words around a little bit and check herself. See what she would think if someone else was saying the same things, but just talking about blackness. I wonder what she would have to say if she took a moment to think about that. Let's see. Mr. Tickletrunk, Scribelight, I appreciate you. Well, thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. I appreciate you too. Deco, notice how she just skipped over the civil rights era, Scribelight. Oh, she skipped over a whole lot of things. Barack Obama's presidency being the most significant one in recent times that I shouldn't be surprised at this stage of the game because it is rarely ever brought up in these kinds of conversations as any kind of counterpoint to the notion that everything is white all the time. But still a little bit, just a little bit. Thank you, Mikhail, the Driving Ape Man, for the red liquid offering pear. I'll just pretend that's a pepper jack. Sure. Septus Wolf, her thinking that God would rather her to hate all white people says volumes about her beliefs. Yeah. I mean, God, give me the strength to hate white people. You know, and as I said, the Bible is full of contradictions, but the, you know, sort of classic idealistic interpretation of Christianity, is Christianity meant to promote hate? Well, yeah. I mean, most religions are exclusionary of others. Dr. Keeve, were you talking about this earlier? The Bundy, yes, the Bundy. Yeah, she was bringing up that incident or that situation as a precursor to January 6th. That their opposition of the government was just again a sort of a dress rehearsal for what was going to come on January 6th, even though that happened many years ago and didn't involve any of those people. But that philosophy, I guess, that philosophy of defying the government and not conforming to the standards and rules that are being imposed upon you, which is obviously symptoms of not whiteness, I guess. Let's see. Mike Savage, scribe-lite Christian, she claims, yet wants to hate white people. Hate is not part of Christ's teachings. Part of Christ's teachings, no. At least generally speaking. I mean, I'm not a theologian, so I can't speak for every page that might say something otherwise. But no, classically speaking, Christ was not about hating people. The rest of the Bible, though, and events therein, well, let's see, Mike R. I wonder what would happen if a white person made this presentation about black people. Well, that's the thing. That's sort of the test that I would hope that she'd occasionally put herself to in her selective site recommendation. Is she ignoring the core of what she's preaching by not trying to apply it elsewise to others of a different race and see how that would sit with her? If someone was standing on a stage saying the exact same things, would that make her uncomfortable? Would that make her want to object? And if so, why is her speech any different? Jeanette, scribe-lite, she probably doesn't want black people to take responsibility for their own actions. She wants to point a finger at everyone else. Well, collectivizing anyone and saying, here are the bad guys and here are the good guys, and I'm part of the good guys, never wise, because there's usually plenty of exceptions. And it really does come down to individual instances and individual examples. If you're going to generalize about things, you can go for statistics, but statistics also have to be looked at carefully. Thank you, X-Bubba Hotep. So our final statement, how is it to be a problem? So being Catholic, but oh, Lexi Mads, you skipped me. Did I? Nobody, not me. Did she say clinical or critical psychology? I think she said clinical. Pretty sure she said clinical. Okay. Lexi Mads, this whole speech gave the alt-right legitimacy and fuel. I suppose. I don't claim to know all the beliefs of the alt-right, but if you have an aversion to people of other races, or if you're going to base your beliefs about the world on the declarations and vilifications of individuals, and then sure. But yeah, like I say, nothing about this was helping to further race relations at all. It's attempting, at least in spirit, to fortify that race relations will always be bad. I mean, the phrase race relations to me is also kind of, why can't we just put it in the same category as hair color and eye color? Why can't we do that? Why? Mike Savage, scribe-lite, there's only 2 commandments in Christianity: love God and love your neighbor. Hate is not part of the deal. I am not a practicing Christian. I will leave it to those that are to make those statements. But again, my understanding of the general thrust of most religions, at least in their best days, is to do good and not do bad. So, Mr. Tickle Trunk, it infuriates me that people like her parrot white nationalist talking points with a different spin and creates the same result: racial tension and, in some cases, segregation. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what other ends to her means here she wants, if not racial tension, racial division, and racial segregation in mind, if not in body. Because when she starts talking about racial identity, you got nowhere to go. If you're going to collectivize everybody on the basis of their skin color and also say that you're part of a club because of your skin color, racial identitarianism is a dumb philosophy. It is a dumb philosophy. Doesn't matter what race you're talking about. I said this before, and I will say it until the day I die. Racial identitarianism is a dumb philosophy. It helps no one, helps nothing at all. And if you don't believe me, tell me again about what white supremacy means, about what the Ku Klux Klan professed. If you think racial identitarianism is a positive thing, tell me why the Ku Klux Klan and their philosophy on race was bad. Because these two things cannot exist at the same time. Hate to tell you. Let's see. Mike R., the future of race relations looks very ominous. I refuse to believe that. Okay. Just like I don't think this lady speaks for everybody. I don't believe that the majority opinion in this country is that everybody's a racist and everybody's scared of each other on the basis of race. I don't believe that that is the majority opinion or the majority belief system. I think it is the most hyped. I think it is the most publicized. I think the people that claim it or protest it get the most press, the most attention, the most money in donations and virtue and so on and so forth. But I am, maybe I'm naive. It's entirely possible. Maybe I'm an idealist. That's entirely possible too. Despite all my cynicism and everything else, I am not of the opinion that this philosophy, hers or the reverse or others like it, represent the majority. I don't. I have no reason to think we have not advanced in a significant way away from that kind of thinking for the most part. Now, I am ready to be disappointed, as I have been many times in the past and will probably do so in the future. But be the change you want to see. Behave in a way that you want others to treat you, etc. The golden rule of all the other sort of truisms in life and small philosophies, it's still a good one. Not a perfect one, but it's a good one. And that is what I believe, and that is what I practice. In the absence of a formal religion, I'll take that until I'm shown that it's a waste of my time. But with that, everyone, that was Theo Ed, and that was Pathological Whiteness, or so we're told. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the both of us tomorrow night on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we'll talk about the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, thank you for joining me so much. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everyone who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.